On today's episode of Empowering Women in Real Estate, the podcast, we're going to be talking about what 400 episodes taught me about the power of consistency.
Hi, I'm Karen Cooper, a wife, mom of three, real estate broker, team owner, and founder of Empowering Women in Real Estate. As a realtor, I've personally helped well over 700 families in my career, and now I help thousands of women from all across the country balance real life and real estate through daily inspiration, motivation, and actionable plans to increase their success. Listen in as I share stories and tips from my life and business and interview some of my favorite people.
Hi there. I'm so glad you're here for today's episode. This is episode 400. 400 episodes. That is pretty crazy. I was trying to find a stat about, how many podcasts ever get to this many episodes. And the best I could gather, and all comes from ChatGPT, which did not cite its sources, so take that for what you want. But it says that well under 1% of podcasts ever reach 400. And according to industry benchmarks, 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3, and 95% never make it to episode 200. Now, if those are accurate, which, it's hard to say anymore, what is or isn't, then those are some pretty crazy numbers. But I don't necessarily doubt those numbers either, because I think about, how many people I know or have heard of have said, oh, I'm going to start a podcast, or I'm starting a podcast. And, you don't really see it ever get off the ground, or not consistently. I mean, there's a couple of people that I follow in different spaces that are amazing and have had podcasts, and I've loved their podcasts, but they're inconsistent. They'll put out a few episodes and then they don't do any more episodes for a year. Just one podcast that I really like that had been around for, maybe a year and a half. They haven't put out a new episode in well over a year. And so that doesn't surprise me. There's also a lot of podcasts, I think, like a lot of other things for those of us in the real estate industry. We're constantly and this is not the topic of today's episode, but this is just kind of what's coming to me. We're constantly sold in the real estate industry. We are sold shiny objects, and we are sold, this marketing strategy and that marketing strategy, and podcasts are sold as a marketing strategy. And I know this because I get contacted by companies all the time, and I am on shows all the time. There's these companies that you can hire, and they talk about what it's such a great thing to have a podcast and to, and listen, I think it is, because I love it. We'll talk more about that. And, they talk about the benefits and, for whatever it is that you pay them every month, and then they help you to find guests. And I've been guests on some of those podcasts. So, it kind of gets sold to a lot of people as a marketing strategy. And when you're doing things sometimes strictly because you think it's the best strategy, but it's maybe not authentic to you, or you don't have the heart behind it, it's hard to be consistent. And that is a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. So, 400 episodes. I've obviously learned a lot about podcasting. Today's episode is not about podcasting specifically. But obviously, if that is something that interests you, then I have done episodes on it in the past, or feel free to reach out. I'm happy always to share what I've learned. But today's episode is really about consistency. To get to 400 podcast episodes, you have to have some consistency. And I've learned some things. There are some things that I've got 5 things actually for you specifically about that have helped me to get to 400 episodes of the podcast. These are also, incidentally enough, these are the same strategies, tips, the same things that have helped me to create a real estate community of more than 41,000 women in the industry. That's our Empowering Women in Real Estate group on Facebook, which if you're not already there, we'd love to have you come and join us. It's what has helped me to create monthly meetups where we have them meeting in many different cities across the country. And we've been doing meetups since, well before COVID. It's what has helped me to have such a consistent real estate business. When I was actively in the field selling homes myself, serving clients myself, I consistently closed 50 to 60 plus transactions every year. And now I've been out of personally serving clients for 7 years, almost 7 years now. And I'm still, because I have consistent habits, I still consistently prospect and I still consistently generate 15 to 20 million in sales volume each year, business that is closed by my agent partners. So that is what this episode is about today. It is about that consistency and how you can put that to work in your life and in your business. And here's the thing. We are all always being consistent. You are just consistently being consistent at things that are good, positive, that are going to help you to grow your business, improve your life, or you are consistently doing things that are bad, that are not improving your business or not improving your life. And so there's a decision that has to be made there. What do you want? What kind of life do you want to have? What kind of business do you want to have? And whether you like it or not, one way or the other, you are being consistent. You are being consistent in a way that's moving you forward, or you are being consistent in a way that is moving you backwards. And so what I want to focus on today is what I've learned about consistency. It is truly one of my superpowers. I will say this though, I am not perfect when it comes to consistency. There are certain areas and phases of my life where it is definitely easier for me to be consistent than others. And you will probably see this too, and you probably see this in your own life. But I hope that you're able to implement a little bit of what I shared today to help you to be consistent in the areas that matter most to you. And so why consistency? Why do we care? Why do you care about being consistency and about being consistent? And it is because of the momentum that it gives you. When you are consistent at something, you start to over time get momentum. And that momentum, and again, you're either getting momentum moving in a positive direction or you are having momentum moving you in a backwards direction. That momentum, it's so much easier to keep going. I always, when I think about, I talk about this a lot, especially around prospecting, right? And it's so much easier. I give the example of like if you're starting a fire, it is so much easier to keep a fire going, like if you start a campfire or we have a little fire pit in our yard, and especially like this time of year before it gets too hot or in the fall, we love to sit out by the fire pit. And it's a lot easier to keep the fire burning than it is to get it started in the first place. And that is the same with anything. That is the same with any habit that you have. That is the same with your real estate business. That is the same with podcasting. It is so much harder to get started than it is to keep it going once you start getting momentum. And that momentum only comes from consistency. This is why so many agents struggle in their business with the real estate roller coaster, right? Where you're up and down constantly. You do a lot, you don't have anything going on, so you do a ton of activity to get things going. But then as soon as you start getting clients to work with, then either that activity that you were doing was such a massive level that you can't keep it going, or you just drop it altogether. And so then by the time those clients go to closing, now you're right back where you started again with nothing in your pipeline. And so now you're struggling, you're doing all this effort to try to get business moving again. Whereas if you can just keep some consistency, consistent habits, consistent prospecting, that's what I do and have done for all of these years. This is year 24 for me in my business. It comes much more easily. And so that's why you want to be consistent. So I have 5 things for you. I have 5 things that I have learned from 400 episodes about consistency and how you can put those to work in your life. And so the number 1 is you need to make sure that this thing that you want to be consistent about is important to you, and that it is an important thing, because it is so much easier to be consistent about something that is important to you and that is authentic to you than it is something that you hate, or it is something that you don't enjoy. And, that's not to say that we don't do things that are hard. I do hard things all the time, but there has to be some authenticity around it. And it has to be something that has some importance to you. And sometimes, and just being honest about this, sometimes that importance you don't feel immediately when you start it. When I started this podcast, it's been, 7 years ago now, I think, almost 7 years. When I first started this podcast, it didn't resonate with me quite as much as it has come to resonate over the years. And I think that's probably very true anytime we start something new. But what did resonate with me was the purpose behind it, right? The purpose behind being able to, I started empowering women in real estate, the community, 12 years ago. And the purpose behind that was connecting with other women in the industry, recognizing and realizing how I feel or how I felt in my business, and realizing that other women probably felt the same, and writing stories and telling those stories and being able to connect with other women. And the podcast was just an extension of that, and has become a big extension of that. And in fact, I can't tell you how many times I hear from people who go to join our Facebook group who heard about it from the podcast. In their mind, the podcast came first before the group did, before the community did, when actually it was the community that came first. And so once I was able to kind of plug in and connect with the importance of this and why it was important to me, well, then that consistency has been easy. It has been easy for me to do ever since, after a couple of little hiccups in the beginning, which I'll share here in a little bit. You have to make sure, for me, prospecting, I don't love prospecting in my business. I don't love prospecting in my real estate business. I have never loved prospecting in my real estate business. I can tell you that with complete honesty. Not one day have I loved it. But it is important, because I know, when I've come to know and realize after all of these years in the business, that consistent prospecting is what allows me to continue to have a consistent business after all of these years. And so because I know how important it is, it helps me to make sure that I am consistent with it. And these other tips that I give are also part of what allows me to be so consistent with it, and how I'm able to be consistent. And so all of those kind of need to go together in order to help you to really be consistent. But the first thing is making sure that you are being consistent about important things and things that are authentic to you. And I always give running examples. I used to run. There was a time of my life where I actually did run and actually enjoyed running, but that is that's decades ago. But now, if I were to decide that I wanted to be consistent about running, well, that would be really hard for me. And it would be really hard for me to be consistent, because it's just not something that resonates with me. Like if I'm going to be consistent about something, it has to resonate, or I can't do it, period. And that's going to be the same for you. Number two, in order to really be consistent about something, you need to make it a habit. And the best books for this, there's two books about habits that I really find to have really helped me over the years. One is Atomic Habits by James Clear. We hear about that book a lot. It's a very popular one. But the one that I actually think I like even more, it's similar in topic, but different enough, and it really resonates with me, is called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And The Slight Edge is kind of talking about that consistency and about those habits. And it's just a very slight difference to get there. And so when you can make something a habit, it increases your ability to be consistent, tenfold. And so I have made my podcast recording a habit. I do it on certain days. I have a certain rhythm. And so it actually feels, Wednesday, I'm recording this episode for you on a Wednesday, podcast episodes release on a Wednesday. It feels strange to me for a Wednesday to come and I'm not recording a podcast episode, because it is just part of my habit. Same thing with my prospecting. For the last, I don't know how many years, 7, 8 years, my habit has been to do my prospecting on Monday mornings. I no longer do it daily. When I was building my business, there have been phases where I would do a certain number of tasks every day, Monday through Friday. Now I do them all on one day of the week. That makes sense for me. And I do that on Monday mornings, and that's my habit. And so and because it's such a habit, if I am not sitting down and opening up my CRMs first thing on Monday morning, it doesn't feel right to me because that is my habit. And so the more you can make something a habit, then you stop negotiating with yourself. You're right. Like think about brushing your teeth. We all have a kind of rhythm around brushing your teeth. When you do it, how you do it, what it comes after. In Atomic Habits, they call that habit stacking. And so we all have that to the point where it kind of feels like you almost kind of do it on autopilot. I don't even think about brushing my teeth. Like, right. It's, I take my shower, I get out, I put the thing on my face, and then I brush my teeth. Like that, like I don't even think about it because those are just the steps that I do. And for you, it's probably the same. And so it's that habit is so ingrained that it just makes everything easier. And that is the same thing, whether you are wanting to do podcasting or you are wanting to do something to improve your health or you are wanting to improve your business and your prospecting. If you can make it habit and build it in as a habit in your day and in everything that you do, it's going to make it so much easier for you to be consistent with it. For me, I have a habit now of walking my dog, and I walk my dog almost every morning. We certainly have days where, it doesn't happen, but 95+% of the time, a walk is happening every morning. And it's my habit. Like it's part of my routine. It's part, like it feels weird if I'm not going out for a walk. And so the more you can do that with whatever it is you're trying to create that habit around or have that consistency around, the better. And then and you just stop negotiating with yourself. I don't negotiate with myself in the morning. I know that I'm going to have my coffee, I'm going to read my Bible, and I'm going to write in the group, and I'm going to have my morning things, and then I'm going to change clothes, and then I'm going to take Leia for a walk. And so that's just my steps. It's just my habit. I don't usually negotiate with myself on it unless it's raining or it's super, super cold. And so if you can make it a habit, it makes it so much easier. Tip number 3 for you is you need to prioritize or block time for it. So whatever the thing is that you are wanting to be consistent around, you have to prioritize it and you've got to make time for it. There are only 2 things, and I actually have done episodes on this before. Time blocking doesn't work for me. And actually, I think that in real estate, time blocking is really hard because so much of what happens in our day is not expected. And for me, for my personality, that did not work for me. I could have a beautifully crafted scheduled day and then something happens. I get an offer on a listing. That's a good thing, but that kind of changes what you're going to do in the day. Or, my listing doesn't appraise, or home inspection comes out, or, somebody calls, I need to go show something. Like, so much of that happens. And so for me, time blocking my day really didn't work because those disruptions, and they're not really disruptions because that's part of the work, but the way my brain works, it felt like a disruption because I had already kind of planned out my day. And that's not the energy that you want to have in your real estate business.
There's something about midlife in real estate that nobody really talks about. You don't hate the business. In fact, you're probably really good at it. But sometimes after years or even decades, you just realize that you don't want to keep running your business the same way. Maybe you want fewer clients or you're ready to step back from production altogether. And that's why I created the Midlife Real Estate Blueprint. It will help you to redesign your business for the next chapter and whatever that looks like for you. Visit empoweringwomenrealestate.com and click on Midlife Real Estate Blueprint to learn more.
So there are only 2 things that I block for. And one of them is Wednesdays for my content day. And I have done this for years. Even when I was in active servicing of clients, Wednesday was my content day, and I would not schedule appointments on Wednesdays. Now, again, you always have the exceptions that come up, but 95+% of the time, no appointments happen on Wednesdays because it is content day. And so that is blocked for creating podcasts and all that goes into that, which is what has helped me to be consistent and now have recording, episode 400. I do it with my prospecting. I block Monday mornings. The first 2 hours of my Monday mornings are blocked. You cannot schedule an appointment during that time. I do not schedule things during that time because that is my prospecting time. And having those 2 things blocked I guess I should really say maybe it's three things, because my morning routine I do kind of have sort of blocked out on my schedule too, because I won't start my day until a certain time because I am making sure that I get my morning routine done. So, whatever the things are that are important to you that you are trying to be consistent with, whether it is a consistent exercise habit that you're trying to start or keep going, or something to maybe it's time to read, right? It's time to fill your own cup. Maybe it is that prospecting time in your business. But whatever those important things are to you, block that time for it, and that is what's going to help you to be consistent. Number four is you have to make it simple. There is no better way to struggle with consistency than to make it too complicated. And I have learned this over and over again, so many times in my life and in my business. I'll give you one very specific example that actually is about this podcast. And when I first started the podcast, it was very complicated. I had somebody who was helping me with it. So I would have to make an appointment with her. She would have to bring in all of her equipment. She would record while she would do all the things while I was recording it. Like it wasn't easy. And so because of that, my first 4 episodes were recorded. The show was released, and then nothing happened for 2 months. If I remember correctly, I think those first 4 episodes, we released them all on the same day. And I think it was in November of 2019, I think it was. And I didn't actually start promoting the show or recording the next episode until January of 2020. And it's just because it was too hard. I had made the process around recording the podcast it was too difficult for everything that I have happening in my life. So I had to make it easier on myself. And so I stopped recording with someone else. I started just using my laptop and headphones and GarageBand, which was an app on my MacBook. And that's how I started. And then after a while, that was a little more complicated too. And so I started just using my phone. And so for the last, probably for 300 episodes at least, if not more, probably 350 episodes of this podcast have all been recorded using my AirPods and my iPhone. I record these episodes on the Notes app, or not the Notes app. What is it? The Voice Notes app. And then I load it to a Dropbox for my producer, and she grabs it from there, and we go on to our next steps. Now, could it be even more perfect if I, used a professional microphone in a studio and all those things? Yes, I'm sure it would sound 10 times better. Would it be even better from a strategic point of view if I were to record this with video and load it to my YouTube channel? Absolutely. But I don't have bandwidth for any of those things right now. That is just not, I really love podcasting. I really enjoy coming to you each week and sharing things and using this particular medium. But it's also just one small piece of everything else that happens in my life and in my business. And at this point, I'm not interested in, I don't have the bandwidth in trying to make it harder. So think about that with your life and with your business. I can give you examples with prospecting. There were times in my career where my prospecting habits were terrible because I was making it too hard. I had to write this many letters. I had to call this many people. I had to, whatever, fill in the blank. I mean, I've done, when I think about the early years of my career, all the different things that I did. And I don't regret the different things that I did or tried, because part of it is you have to see what works for you. You're not going to know if something's authentic to you. You're not going to know if it resonates with you until you try a lot of times. So I did have to do that. But what I realized is a lot of times I was just making it too hard. I was just making it too complicated. I've done that with my morning routine many times. I add too many steps because there's so many things I love. Like, I love certain devotionals. I love reading. And so I would add in too many things. I would be trying to do too many journals and too many this and too many that. And then what happens before long is it's just too hard to keep up with because it's too many steps. And so then I would stop and then I would quit, or it wouldn't be as fulfilling or enjoying, or I wouldn't get as much enjoyment out of it. And so my best advice to you, and this is maybe the most important of all the 5 tips for being consistent, is whatever it is, make it simple. I mean, make it stupid simple. The more simple you can make it, the better. And the more simple it is, the more likely you are to be able to be consistent with it. And part of that simplicity is not just in the number of steps that you're doing or whatever it is, but it's also in how much of it you're doing. When I think about my years in active production with 3 kids, I didn't have time to prospect for 2 and 3 hours a day. I mean, I just didn't. I didn't have time for that because if I was going to spend 2 to 3 hours a day prospecting, and then, you also need to have time for appointments, which would be another, 3, 4 hours. But then I've also got kids to take to school and kids to pick up from school, and then evening routines and activities. And like, there literally wasn't time. And so having my prospecting routine being as simple as possible, as few things as possible, has allowed me to be as consistent as I am. And I know for sure that it is what has led me to have the amount of consistency in my business that I've had. I have not served a client myself personally for 7 years, but I still have business coming in regularly. We just had a closing I got paid for this morning. That was from one of my leads that was generated from my prospecting and was served by one of my team members. And so, you know, I think we feel like if we're not doing a massive amount of activities, we get shamed for it. I feel like social media kind of does that because there's the people that you follow that are, spend 2 hours here, or you got to call 100 people a day, or you know, that might be great if I didn't have kids and I had nothing else going on, and if I had no clients, then that would probably be a perfect thing to do. But the way my world works and the way my life works, and plus I would like to enjoy my life, that doesn't make sense for me. And so, maybe I would be able to do that once or twice, but there's no way I could do that consistently day after day. But I can write 5 notes every day. I can do that with no problem. I can message 5 people a day. I can add one person to my database a day or a week. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you do it day after day and week after week and year after year, that compounds. That's where, you get that momentum, and it just keeps going. It just keeps going. And so if there is an area of your life or your business that you are really struggling in, you're struggling in your consistency, and right, answer number one, it's important to you, right? So it's something you're trying to be consistent about. You're making it a habit. You're prioritizing some time. If it's still hard for you, then you maybe need to simplify it. Maybe you need to cut whatever it is you're trying to do down in half. If you don't enjoy exercise, and you're doing it because you have to, right? It's good for you, it's good for your body, but you're going to try to walk for an hour every day. That's probably too much, and you're probably not going to be consistent with it. But what if you started with 10 minutes a day? You could do that. You could certainly do that. What happens is, as you start to get momentum and as these things start to become your habits, then you're able to do more and more, right? I almost always do a 1 mile walk every day. And especially during the summer, I notice that I will actually usually do 2 miles because it feels good and I'm in the rhythm and the weather is nice. And so I want to keep going with my prospecting. My habit, one of the goals for my prospecting each week is to give 4 referrals, right? 4 referrals or four reviews. And I often find that I do a lot more than that every week because I get in the groove. And it's the same thing with whatever that is. So make it simple, shrink it down. You're going to find that most times you're going to do more, but because it's such a manageable amount of whatever it is you're trying to do, you're going to be able to do it consistently. And then my 5th tip for you in terms of consistency, things that I've learned, is you have to set yourself up for success. And I think sometimes we have these great ideas, I'm going to do whatever. One thing I saw today, I've seen a bunch of people today posting about doing like the 30 reels in 30 days thing, right? Which is great. That's awesome. But if you don't block time for it, if you don't set yourself up for success by having, what are the tools that you need, right? In order to do that, you probably are going to really benefit from having, what is it? I'm looking at mine, but I can't think of the name. This is the menopause brain fog. You put your phone on it, tripod, the stand, right? And so, you probably are going to need one of those, and you're going to probably need one of those handy. And you're probably going to need some ideas of some B-roll that you can take. You can't just create a reel every day if you don't have some content to pull from. So you're going to need to have some B-roll or whatever. And, with prospecting, if part of my prospecting, one of my things is writing a certain number of notes. Well, what do I need for that? I need note cards. I need gift cards because I often include gift cards in my notes. I need stamps, and I need return address labels. So I need to make sure that I have all of those things. That is setting yourself up for success. It's great to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and this is when I'm going to do it, and I'm going to prioritize that time. But if you don't have the tools that you need, if you're not setting yourself up for success, then your likelihood of being able to achieve whatever it is that you're trying to achieve is a lot smaller. If you want to run a marathon and you're going to start by, running every day, but you don't have any running shoes, you're not going to go very far, right? So you have to set yourself up for success. So make sure that you have whatever the tools are that you need to make things happen. And part of that setting yourself up for success, I think part of that is, honestly, that's sort of a culmination of all 5 of these tips, right? Setting yourself up for success is making sure that whatever it is that you're trying to do is simple enough that you can do it. I always like to say, like, on your worst day, right? It's simple enough. And making sure that you're setting yourself up for success by prioritizing and blocking the time for it. Setting aside the time for whatever it is that you want to do. Setting yourself up for success by making whatever it is that you're wanting to do a habit. It just makes it so much easier to just keep going, keep going. Setting yourself up for success by making sure that you're being consistent about something that's just really important to you in the first place. You're not doing it because it looks good. You're not doing it because, you think other people think you should. You're doing it because it really means something to you, and so, if you have all of those 5 pieces, those are 5 things that I've really learned about consistency, then you can be consistent about anything. You truly can. And the more consistent you are, the more momentum you're going to get, the more success you're going to have. I'm here now at episode 400 of the podcast, and this podcast has been an amazing blessing. I've met so many people through the show. We've increased the size of our community, of our Empowering Women in Real Estate community, because of the podcast. I have met wonderful agents that I have partnered with in business, either on my team or at Real, that have found me because of the podcast. I have closed transactions from agents that have listened to the podcast. They found me through the podcast, learned about the areas that I served, and then referred clients. It has opened up a lot of different avenues, a lot of different things. And I would not have had all of those opportunities had I not made it this far. If I had stopped at episode 4, which is where I had stopped originally, right? We got 4 done and then nothing happened for 2 months. And if I had just stopped there, all of the benefits and success that I have enjoyed since then would not have happened. Being able to find consistency in this through all of those 5 areas that I shared with you today, that is what has enabled all of those things to happen and has enabled me to get here to episode 400. So what happens from here? What happens from here is we keep going. I genuinely enjoy podcasting. And, when will it stop? I don't know. Is it episode 800? Is it episode 1400? I don't know. It probably stops when it stops being fun. And it probably stops when I stop feeling like I have anything to share or to say. And it probably stops when I stop hearing that it has helped someone. And that is probably when. And I have no idea. I have no timeline, no timetable. We're just open, and we're just going to continue to do what we do. So 400 episodes. Thank you. Thank you for being here for episode 400. This would be fun. If you have listened to all 400 episodes of the show, would you message me? I would love to hear from you if you have. I'm at karen.w.cooper. You can message me on Instagram. If you have listened to all 400, and I know from talking to some of you that there are people out there that have listened to all 400 episodes of the show, I would love to know who you are, if that is you. And whether you've listened to all 400 or you've listened to 40 or, 14 or 4, or maybe this is your first episode today, thank you for being here. I'm so glad that you are here. And until next time, stay well.
Thank you for listening to Empowering Women in Real Estate, the podcast. Click subscribe to be notified every Wednesday when our latest episode is released, and be sure to check out our group on Facebook.